let's begin. You know what, but I'll ask one thing before, just because it's important. How many of you are product people, product managers? Okay. Marketing people? Entrepreneurs? Okay, so what the rest? Like a big bunch in the middle that you don't know what you're doing in life, and, or you might be investors. Yeah. Okay, so all right, so let's begin, and here we go. Analytics strategy, and we're going to talk about new methodologies. A little bit about myself. I come from an entrepreneurial background. I do product today. I own Y Perspective, it's my company. Been consulting for the last 2.5 years on both product strategy, and analytics. Those are my specialties. As you can see, I've done a few things in my life, and of course I have one beautiful wife and 3 boys and 1 dog. That's my backbone. And let's begin. So where do we begin? Where do we begin? We begin with this date. I don't know who recognizes that date. It shouldn't be. I hope it's nobody's birthday, because it's a bit. Because then I'm really old here. But this date is the day that Google Analytics came to our lives, or to the public. It's the day that Google Analytics was published to the web, to everybody. What it did, it kind of revolutionized the internet and the way people interact, and developers have the ability to understand their sites and what they do. For roughly 5 years later, they almost killed all the competition. Nobody was doing anything. They just shocked everybody because it was free. I remind you, it was web back then, no mobile, and it was dominant. Okay. Afterwards, after about 5 years, and moving on to today, things have moved on. Okay, this is today a very competitive marketplace. A lot of companies, and these are a few of them, are fighting to be the ones who get to get their 3 lines of code into your website, or their SDK into your code, into your app code. Okay, why? Because it's a very profitable market, and there's a lot of data and a lot of value in being there. So it seems like we have a lot of competitors and a lot of capabilities, and this allows us to do so many things that we've never done before. It gives us the functionality and the values and the capabilities of doing things like data-driven. It means that we can be very, very data-driven, okay, because of the competition, because each one of these, and some do it more and some do it a little bit less, but they give us a lot of value in terms of capabilities, metrics, analytics, demographics, devices, you name it, okay? So theoretically, data-driven should be just killing it, right? We should, the data-driven approach, the data-driven way of life of the product manager should really be flourishing right now. but let's look at what's going on right now, and look at what we as product people, product managers, how we handle our analytics. Okay, so what's the common practice? And from my experience, almost all product managers manage their analytics, or implement or plan their analytics in this fashion. So first of all, we have a lot of capabilities. What we want to do is we want to map all the possible interactions that the user can have with the app or website or whatever. Okay, we build an event table. I hope that all of you are familiar with that term. Map up all the events, write them down, and you let your developers. You hand it over to the developers, they implement it, you release a version with the analytics code on it, and you wait to accumulate data. You want some users to interact with your site, and for everything to be recorded, to get the data out there. Then you start browsing through the data, now that you have it, and you try to follow user path. Okay, you're trying to get the insight, you're trying to get the data, the value, to extract value out of this, because again, we're not here just to collect information, we want to get something out of it. The problem is that it's not that easy, right? If some of you have done it in the past, you know that having a lot of data means having a lot of opportunities, a lot of ways that you can go, which aren't that easy. So usually what happens, and again, this is, say, 9 out of 10 times, what we see is that product managers settle for dashboards which are kind of lacking. Okay, usually what we see is new users versus returning users. We see some, we record the conversion of onboarding processes, and we might see retention metrics, D1, D2, D7, and sort of these things. But there's a problem. There's a problem with it because with this method, we're utilizing, and again, this is an estimate, and this is something that is kind of general, but we're utilizing around 5 to 10% of the capabilities of these tools, okay? And it just doesn't work, okay? What we do, what I do as part of my profession, I come to companies and I see these issues, I see these problems, and we're trying to fix it, okay? But you would say, okay, that's the logical way to do it, okay? How other way can I do it? I mean, I have the events, I have users in the site, I'm trying to gather as much information as possible. It sounds pretty logical, right? It sounds like, yeah, I need that information. I want to map out everything. I need to gather all the information. I don't want to miss anything else. I need to wait for the data to accumulate, right? I can't start asking questions before I have any data, right? There's no point to it. But it doesn't work. But let's see what's so wrong, okay? Why doesn't this work, and why doesn't this generate so much profit? Can't hear us? Can't see me? I'll try raising my voice because the microphone here isn't that great. Okay, so one of the reasons is data overload. Better? Data overload. When we have so many events, when we have so many data points, the problem is that we have, if we're doing it right, if we're doing it like we should, okay, and we're analyzing and we're mapping and we're gathering all the events and all the interaction that our users are making, we usually have over 100 events per app or per website, okay, which is a lot. It's quite a lot, and it causes a few things. So, for one, from all the, you can't see the wood out of the tree, right? Because too much information, you get cluttered and you don't see what's going on. The other problem that we see is that it confines you. Now, it's kind of tricky because it sounds like the other way around. How can it confine me that I have so much data and it confines me? The thing is that, think about it as, if I ask you to find, I don't know, some note that someone has hidden in a room full of balloons. Okay, if the balloons are on the floor and, like kids have in birthday parties. Most of the people will say, okay, I would look under the balloons. Okay, because that's the information. That's where you see all the issues. You see, okay, there's a lot of opportunities here. Most people will not look on a shelf and will not look on the ceiling. Right? And that's what happens to us when we have so much information. It confines us and we're saying, okay, the solutions have to be within what we've done, right? Because we've mapped out everything. We've looked at all the opportunities. Everything is here. We just need to extract it. We come to ourselves and say, okay, we're doing something wrong because we're not getting the data out of it because it's here. That's not the case, okay? That doesn't work that way. Another problem is that we have weak events. When we have so many events, we don't have the energy and we don't have the time to take each one of these events and give them the proper properties, okay? If you guys are familiar with properties, event properties or event parameters, these are parameters that we give to events to give them a little bit more depth, a little more information that could tell us more information about preceding events or the context of the events, or maybe quantitative data that refers to these specific events. So if we have so many events, we usually don't have the time, we don't have the effort to actually do that. we usually, again, if we have so many events, we're usually not going to work with user properties. User properties are very, very important. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But user properties are tools that we can use to give properties to users and not events. Okay? And later on, we'll see how we use that. But again, when we look at a broader context, we're using a lot of events. We're not going to have time to focus on that. It's costly. Okay? Some of the analytics platforms that we've seen before are free. Some of them aren't. Mixpanel, for example, which is one of the more popular ones, is free up to a certain level. Okay, they give you 5 million data points a month. So it sounds like a lot. It sounds like it's more than enough. But if say you have 10,000 or even 20,000 users, you're going to reach that point really, really quickly. Okay, we see that on apps or websites that utilize the old methodology of having a lot of events. Okay, and a user can generate even up to 100 events per session, which is a lot. Think about that. You take it and you calculate it by month and year and up to a year, and the amount of users that you have. You run out of events really quickly, and it starts to cost. And the most important thing out of this list is that it makes us neglect and postpone the most important decision that we need to make. The most important thing that we need to do with analytics is ask the right questions. That's why it's here. That's why it's there. We're not here to gather information. Okay, it's something that we really need to understand. We need to ask the right questions, and if we are focusing on events and we're saying, let's spread out all the events, gather all the events, make sure that everything is firing, and only later, at a later stage, we'll try to analyze the information and try to extract the information and ask the questions. It just doesn't work. Okay? One of the things that we see a lot is the common, call it, battle between reports versus analysis. Okay? So what's the difference between reports and analysis? And I'll be a little bit blunt. In the business world, nobody needs reports. Okay, nobody has ever needed reports, and nobody will ever need reports. Now you'll say, look, but my boss is asking for reports. People want their sales reports, and people want their analytics reports of how many users are coming in, and what's going on at the end of the month in terms of returning users and stuff like that. That's not what we're here for. Okay, because even if you look at these things, and if you think forward a little bit, and you say, okay, so let's look at this report. Okay, it can be. At the end of the day, it's a statistic. These are numbers. The question is what we're doing with them. Now, let's look at two different scenarios. One is that the reports are great. Okay, let's say the reports are great, everything is fine, everything is happening as expected. It doesn't mean that we're not going to do anything, right? It doesn't mean that we're not going to do anything with the numbers and we're not going to analyze. Okay, let's look at the other scenario. Let's say the reports are really, really horrible, and we see a drop in one category or more categories, and there's a problem with it, right? We don't see a scenario where people are saying, okay, that's enough, right? We know there's a problem, and let's not do anything. The next logical step, and the next step that will always happen, is someone will tell you, okay, let's analyze. Why is this happening? Why is this number dropping, and why is that number dropping? Let's analyze and try to understand what's going on. So what I'm saying is, let's not think in terms of reports, and just jump and think directly in terms of analysis. Let's think of why things are happening and what we need to do. Where do I need to identify the problems to understand how to fix them next? So what does it mean? It means that we're looking at the old way, or the common practice of today in terms of analytics. It's kind of backwards. Okay, it's kind of upside down, and what we're doing in our methodology kind of turns it around. Okay, that's what we call it, the right side up methodology. And what it does is it has a few fundamentals. Okay, let's start with the fundamentals, then I'll explain. We'll go through it and explain how it works. The first one is that it's product oriented. Okay, it doesn't mean that whoever is doing it has to be a product person, but it does mean that they need to understand product thinking. It's best that the product manager does this. You need to understand what the product goals are, where the vision of the company is doing. It's really, really difficult to do this for someone who's outside of this group, for someone, maybe a BI individual or someone of that sort. It's very difficult because they don't understand the common thread or the user path or what the objectives are of the business. Okay? So first of all, it has to be product oriented. The second, which is also important, is it has to be strategic. The approach has to be strategic. And what I mean by strategic, it means that the steps are going from the top to the bottom. Okay, we start from the most important thing. We start with the goals. We begin with the goals. We identify the business / product goals. We identify them. We understand, okay, that's where we're striving to be. That's what we want to do. We look at the metrics, try to see which metrics now serve these goals and give us an indication of us going in the right direction. We take that one step, one step down, and we ask the questions. Okay, we're not testing anything yet. We're not looking at the data even yet. We're just asking the right questions. Which questions will answer will serve the metrics that will serve our goals? Okay, this is the most important part. Asking the strategic questions. Then we go into the tactics, which investigation methods we're going to use. And only at the end, only after we've gone through this whole strategic approach, the derivative of this would be the event table. The event table is where we actually write down the events, only the events that are relevant, by the way, so it's going to be a lot less events. Mark them down, and then give it to the developers for them to implement. So how do we begin? We begin with a North Star document. Okay, this shouldn't be. I hope this isn't a new term to all of you. North Star is something that in product thinking is a term that's being used a little bit more these days. Adam Nash is one of the people who is very oriented strategically towards that objective. And one of the things that he said, and I agree with it completely, is that you need to understand, what game we're playing and how do we keep score. Okay, it helps you a lot to understand where you want to be. So you start with your product goals, understand where you are, which market you are, and where you want to be. You try to identify one top metric. Okay, one metric. Sometimes it can be two if your product is. It might have two different audiences, so it might be two. But usually it's one metric, and it's not that difficult to. It's not that easy. Sorry, to find that metric, but one metric that's your North Star. Okay, and then you need to see that every other metric that you do, and every other process, every other analysis is pointing towards that metric, and everything that you do impacts that. Because if it doesn't, then you're not focusing. And again, we're talking product-wise here on the right and the most key and the most critical aspect of your product. Okay. Another point which is important is are progress indicators. Progress indicators, they're different from KPIs, which are performance indicators. Progress indicators are a little bit closer to the reports and the other metrics that we talked about before. Progress metrics are not the core, they're not the key metrics, they're not the top metric, but they're metrics that are important for us to understand because they give us insight and they give us an indication of where we're going. Okay, this could be an example of that. Could be visits or conversion rates and things like that, which the number itself doesn't really matter that much. What matters is where it's going. Okay, so if we see that the conversion rate is going down, it doesn't matter if it was 20% or 40%. If we see that it's going down, we understand that we have a problem and we're not going in the right direction. Okay, in terms of users, of course, if we see that the number of users in the site is going up, we know that we're going in the right direction. Okay, so it's a little bit different. It's not key, but it's really helpful to have these. KPIs. KPIs need to be divided into 3. And again, usually it all depends on the product and and how you approach it. Usually it would be business, product, and marketing. Okay, and just to give you an example of KPIs, again, top-level KPIs. Again, I'm not talking about the specific, just the top-level KPIs. They're going to be, for a business, it could be revenue and growth. For marketing, it could be reach or reach demographics. Okay, if we want to reach a certain demographic, okay, we'll mark that and we'll say, okay, that's where we want to be. CPA, cost per acquisition, is something that, again, is very marketing-oriented. And product, of course, has its, it depends a lot on the different, on our product. But these are metrics that are really important to us, okay? We need to always remember that we're doing the analytics, we're building an analytics plan, not just for us as product individuals, and excuse me, those who aren't, but we also have other stakeholders within the company that have interest in the business and marketing aspects of this, so we need to consider and make sure that we also have, we're also answering their needs. So let's go down into the analytics strategy. Okay, what do we do? How do we approach this? What are we actually here to do? Okay, where do we generate the questions? So we need to understand where do we anticipate, and as you can see, the data-driven decision. Okay, not all decisions, and I'm talking about product decisions and business decisions. Not all of them are data-driven, but a lot of them can be. And if you can think about it, and again, this whole process is a process that you need to do with yourself if you're the only product manager in the company, or sometimes with the CEO, but it's a process. It's not something that you say, okay, let's just sit a few minutes and try to understand it and come up with this on our own. It's a process that you need to think of and go through it a few times. So the first thing is to anticipate data-driven decision and make sure that we're mapping them and we know what they are. And just write them down. We write them down as questions in text. What will make an impact on the key metrics? Okay, on the top metrics that we talked before, we're trying to map out everything. We're trying to think of things that maybe we anticipated, maybe we haven't, maybe they're trivial, maybe they aren't. But the idea here is to try to think what will make an impact, and let's try to map that and make sure that we have all the things that are relevant to it, and we're asking the right questions. The next 3 things are the actual plan that we need to build. So where should we look? Where within the site, within the process, within the user flows, where are points of interest that we have and we want to analyze? How do we investigate? Okay, there are a few tools that we have. Each of these platforms offer, almost all of them offer the same tools. We'll discuss that a little bit later, but let's try to understand for the questions that we asked, how are we going to investigate that? What do we measure? And later on, it's how. Okay, so the last 3 are the actual analytics plan. The analytics plan, and we'll show it a little bit later, is a plan. It's a big Excel that we use that has just questions, and points out the points that we need to make sure that will eventually be in the event table. Okay, so let's just dive a little bit deeper into how it works, into the process of how we build our analytics plan, okay? The right side up analytics plan. So we start with user plan. We start with user path, and all the user paths that we'll show in a second, we want to make sure that that we really understand what they're there for, okay? We want to make sure that what do we really understand from them, okay? And the second point, again, point of thought of looking at these things, how do they serve our one objective, our one key metric? Where do they do that, and where do we need to ask the right questions? So just, again, these are examples. Every product is different, of course, but most of these are common to all products that we see. So we have onboarding, we have interactions like call to action, the core action within the app or website, rewards. I'm not talking about tangible rewards, I'm talking about rewards of you enticing the user to take some action, and then you give him something back, something that he anticipated. Decision points, obviously these are things that are very, very important. Through navigation or conversion. Return, which is, again, in terms of retention. Triggers and habits that are formed. We want to make sure that we're there in the right place and we're asking the right questions. And of course, monetization is something that we always want to have a really, really close look at and make sure we're there. Okay, let's dive now a little bit deeper into the tactics. Till now, we talked about the strategy, how to make sure we're in the right area and we're asking the right questions. Now let's make sure that we understand the tools that we have in terms of tactics to interpret these questions, and not really to interpret, but to implement these questions. How do we implement these questions? Okay, we have a good question, we have something that we want to understand. Let's see what the tools that we have to do that and what the platform is giving us. So first of all, we have the general arithmetic. Okay, summing up things, multiplying, averages, all the regular stuff that we're used to having. Segmentation, again, looking at a bulk of people who have done a certain thing or are have gone through a certain place, and we want to see how they segment. 20% are here, 50% there, 30% there, etc. Funnels, I hope you all are familiar with funnels and know how they work. Again, they can be really, really simple funnels. They can be really complicated and very specific funnels, but these are, again, tools that we use, tactics that we use. Flowcharts and navigation paths. Those are tools that they look really simple. They look like something that we can gain a lot of information from. A lot of times they're more confusing than they're actually the actual value that they can bring us. So be careful with flowcharts. Cohorts. Cohorts are a bit more complex. The idea behind cohorts, the definition of the word is to gather a group of users or people or whatever together and then compare them on one single metric. Okay, so usually what you do is you take a section of your users, and all of them are exactly the same except for one parameter that's different from all of them, and then you compare them. Usually we see that in retention cohorts, so you look at users by the different dates that they've signed up. Okay, so you know how people are, what are the chances of them to return after X amount of days, for instance. Dimensions is a kind of filtering tool. Okay, we see that in Google Analytics uses it a lot, but also in other tools we usually do it with user properties. The idea with user property is that you give a certain property. It's like an event, but instead of firing an event, you give a property to a user. So, for instance, one that I like to use is status. Okay, so you want to give a user a certain status. The status can update, can change within the lifetime of the user. Okay, the user can be a first-time user, then it could be a registered user, it could be a canceled user, but you always change that parameter within the user, and you can look at specific users and not just all of them together. So an example of this, the screen here isn't that great. I don't expect you to read everything here, but this is an example of how an analytics strategy document looks, okay, what it looks like. The idea here is that we have at the beginning, we have the user path, okay, we talked in the beginning, we're talking about user path. Let's say we've chosen onboarding. Now we're looking on our site, okay, how many different ways we can do this, okay, what interests us? Finding users' conversion to trial, or users trying different paths to convert. Okay. The next column is the one that's really, really important. Is the critical to understand. Okay. What do we want to ask here? What do we want to answer? What's the questions that we want to ask here? And if we get this right, this is the core. This is the heart of the entire plan. And we need to really, really think of what the question is that we want to ask here and how it serves us in the future. Okay? So if we ask a good question, Then the next step would be, how do we investigate that? Do we get the answer through funnel? Do we get it through segmentation? Do we get it through just counting how many visitors we have? Okay, it varies. And the last stage is taking all of that and just deriving from it all the key information that we need to gather. Okay, it could be the event. It could be the steps within the funnel. It could be properties within the events that we're using. Okay, it could be a lot of different things. The idea here is to mark all of them down. Okay, and when we have that, the next step, when we're going to build our event table, we're going to go and make sure that everything here is there. Okay, these are the things that we want to make sure that are in our event table, that later on we'll be able to, that later on, when we have the data and when we're coming to analyze this, everything is ready. Okay, everything is ready. We just need to ask the questions and build the funnel or build the segmentation, but it's there. Okay, an example. Let me just give you an example. So for let's say a website, we want to know not just a simple question would be not just what's the conversion rate. Okay, how many people do we convert? How many people start the onboarding process compared to how many finish them and register? We might want to ask something like this: how many people of the people who register? What's the lifetime value of people coming in through one funnel, or compared to people coming in from other funnels? And by funnel, I'm not talking about outside the website, different acquisition channels and stuff like that. I'm talking about people starting from one screen and going through one path. I don't want to give the examples here because this is a real site, but people going and trying a different, trying out one of the products that's given out for free. Okay, one of the experiences that's given out for free. Okay, we want to know if one of these converts better, not just to registration. Maybe it converts better to, it might convert a little bit less than the other one, but it gives us a much higher lifetime value further on in the life of the user. Okay, this is something that we have to anticipate, and we have to ask this question beforehand. Okay, if we would have been using the old way, we wouldn't have been able to ask that question. Okay, we wouldn't even be able to look at that question, to think of that question, because all the data is there, and we're trying to scrimmage between within the data, trying to find the answers. If we're thinking and we don't have any constraints, we're thinking, widely, and we have no constraint, we can look and we can find the right questions, the answers that will give us the right information, and 99% of the time we'll have the tools to be able to implement and get those answers later on. Again, if we do it at the right time. So eventually, we come down and we end up with the events table, because we need to do it. We need to have events, because that's what usually is being recorded. And we talk about events. We talk about events versus page views. Sometimes we'll want events. Sometimes we'll want page views. Sometimes we'll have an event that's called a page view with a property that is the actual page view. Again, properties is one of the things that we're using. Again, these are tactics. Tactics within events, like I said before, we can use within an event. It varies between the tools, but if we're not looking, if we're taking aside Google Analytics for a second, all the other platforms allow us to use properties for events. Okay, so a property could be the time the event has happened, the value of the event, and so on. I'll give an example in a second. Another thing that we're using, okay, and this is getting to be more mainstream, but when we were doing it at the beginning, it was very, very new and nobody was doing it, almost nobody was doing it, is using flags. Flags and counters. We'll show that in a second. It'll be easier to see in an example. User properties, again, very, very important tool. I think I'll just show it. Again, I don't know how well you can see this, but the idea is that this is how our event tables look. Okay, so it's not just an event with when we say, okay, the registration form completed, and you fire it upon passing registration. That's not the idea. That was the old way. What we're adding here are a few things that are very, very interesting. So again, we're talking about flags and counters. So one could be occurrence. Okay, this is something that, these are the counters. This is something that we count, usually in the front end, in the app, or in the website. And it's, a lot of times it's really important for us to understand what time is this? I mean, what occurrence is this of this specific event? So it could be that this user has completed the registration form 3 times. Okay, for registration form it's not that relevant, but a lot of things, it might be that, just the button that, that sends you to the payment page, it could have been that, we will see that on the 3rd time, it usually works better than the 1st time. Okay, there are a lot of things that you can get, insights that are really, really interesting that you can get only if you count on the front side, on the front end of the for the user. And another one are flags. Flags are, again, a property that we give to events, and we flag them. So for the first time, so here for instance, we want to know for this event what was the first top navigation button. Okay, where did he actually start this this process that led him to registration? Now again, it's not something that's happening right now when he's pressing the registration button, right? It happened 5 steps backward. But if we're planning it correctly and we're using the tools correctly, we know that we will need this in the future. We tell our developers this is what we need. It's not that difficult to do, believe me. I've done this quite a few times. And it gives you a lot of insights and stuff that you just couldn't get any other way. User properties, we're nearly done here. User properties, again, can give you a lot of insights because they allow you to give users a property that changes over time. Okay, so instead of events, what we do is we attribute a certain property to a user, and then later on we can change it. So for instance, I think this is a really good example because it's something that would have been really, really difficult to do in any other way. What we've done here is we've used a property called status. Okay, and it's again attached, it's attributed to a user, not an event. And what we do here, and the options that we have for this is we have a visitor, we have subscriber, trial canceller, paying canceller, resubscriber, a lot of different statuses that the user could be under. And if we can do that, and if we can know which users are at which stage, think about it, it's not that simple to do. Because usually most users, they begin as a visitor, okay? They haven't registered, they haven't done anything. Then they might register for a trial. Then they might be a paying user. Then they might be canceled. They might cancel. Even if they use properties, okay, we had that property here of what action is done. This user has, it could have 5 different events with 5 different properties of statuses. Okay, when we have that, we can look only at these types of users, or look at all the users and say how many of them are in status of resubscriber, and it gives us a lot of insights that otherwise, again, I'm not saying that it's impossible, but otherwise you would need a BI or something, some more heavier technical ways to interpret the data to get that information. So we were coming to conclude this, and if you're reading this slide, I hope that well, it could be that we got you to this place, that you've learned something new, but it turned you even, it got you even more confused. And but it's part of the process. Okay, obviously, this is a short lecture, and the idea here is to just give you a taste and try to get you to take this step forward and try it out. And if you need, contact me, and I'll be happy to try and help. I just want to do a quick summary to go over the key things, the key insights that I want you, like the key takeaways that I would like you guys to leave this room today and hopefully remember. So first of all, we need to think strategically. Okay, we need to think strategy. We need to make sure that we're doing the things that are important. Okay, and so it doesn't matter how we call it. If you call it, the right side up methodology, or we call it general or common practice of analytics. The idea here is to understand which are the strategy. We need to start with the goals. We need to make sure that we understand what we want to measure, what matters to us, And those are the things that need to be on top of our mind. We identify the top market, we make sure that everything else is derived from that. Everything is pointing towards that top market, and everything that we do gives us some insight or some explanation to where our top market is going. Again, this could be on the analytics side, it could be on the actual product side as well. We have to make sure that we're asking the right questions. And we're asking questions and we're asking the right questions. We're not just recording events and we're not just monitoring every action that the user does. It does more harm than helps us. Okay, you need to remember that. We need to learn how we investigate our questions. Which are the tools that we have, the tools that we discussed. We need to know how to utilize them properly. And only at the end, we complete the process with the event table. And since we have much less events, and I'm talking about, usually we're talking about 30, 35 events for a robust, a really big app. When we have that, each event could be, handmade, custom-made, with a lot of properties, relevant properties, thinking forward, thinking how these things can serve us in the past, in the future, with flags and with counters, and we get a lot more insight than just having a lot of events. So that kind of concludes this. We are going to have analytics course. By the way, this is like a sponsored moment. If somebody wants to learn a little bit more, it's going to be really soon. Next week, we're starting our next course. That's pretty much it. Any questions? Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll take a short break. For those of you who haven't filled out the form, please either talk to Roy or look at the QR code here. You can do it online and use this opportunity to network and get to know each other, because we have interesting people here. So let's try to get something interesting here out of not just the lectures. But don't go away, because Ronen's lecture is also very important and interesting. Thank you. 5 minutes.